What if I told you there was a man who stood up in front of the world and said something so radical, so dangerous, so completely outside the boundaries of what anyone was willing to accept, that they laughed at him. They called him delusional. They called him a fraud. They called him dangerous. And he smiled and kept talking, because he knew something they did not. He knew that the entire universe was operating by a law so simple, so invisible, so misunderstood, that the moment you finally grasped it, nothing in your life would ever be the same again. His name was Neville Goddard, and he was not a scientist, not a professor, not a philosopher with a university degree. He was a dancer from Barbados, a poor immigrant who came to America with nothing, no money, no connections, no plan. And yet, he walked into the most powerful rooms in New York City and told millionaires, intellectuals, and some of the most educated people in the world that everything they believed about reality was wrong. And they listened, because what he was saying was working. People who followed his teachings were getting jobs they had no right to get. Marriages that were over were coming back to life. People who were sick were recovering. People who were broke were suddenly finding money appearing from directions they never expected. Was it coincidence? Was it luck? Was it the power of positive thinking? Neville said no. It was something far more precise, far more powerful, far more ancient than any of that. He called it the law, and he spent his entire life trying to explain it to a world that was not ready to hear it. But here is the part of his story that nobody talks about, the part that the quote pages and the manifestation coaches leave out completely. Before Neville Goddard changed the world, he was homeless. He was desperate. He was a young man sleeping on floors in New York City with no future in sight. And everything changed for him. Not because someone helped him. Not because luck arrived, but because of one conversation with one man on one night that showed him something about the nature of reality that he could never unsee. This is the real story of Neville Goddard, and once you hear it, you will never look at your own mind the same way again. In 1905, on the tiny island of Barbados in the Caribbean, a boy was born into a large and lively family. His name was Neville Lancelot Goddard. He was one of 9 children. His family was not wealthy, but they were not broken either. They were a family full of energy, imagination, and life. From the very beginning, Neville was different from his brothers. He was not interested in business or practical things. He was fascinated by beauty, by art, by movement, by the invisible forces that seemed to operate underneath the surface of ordinary life. When he was 17 years old, he made a decision that changed everything. He left Barbados and traveled to New York City to study theater and dance. He was young, talented, and completely unprepared for what was waiting for him. New York in the 1920s was electric and brutal at the same time. For every person who made it, 1,000 others disappeared into poverty and obscurity. Neville arrived with almost nothing. And for years, that is almost exactly what he had. He worked as a dancer, sometimes successfully, often not. He scraped together enough money to survive. He slept on other people's floors. He went through periods of real hunger and real desperation. From the outside, his life looked like a slow, quiet failure. A talented boy from a small island who had come to the big city chasing a dream that was not coming together. But inside, something was happening. Neville was reading, thinking, questioning. He was not content to simply accept the world as it appeared to be. He kept asking a question that nobody around him seemed interested in. Why do some people succeed and others do not? It was not talent. He had seen too many talented people fail. It was not hard work. He had seen too many hard-working people stay poor. It was something else, something invisible, something operating at a level most people never thought to look at. And then, one night, he found his answer. In the early 1930s, Neville met a man named Abdullah, an Ethiopian rabbi and mystic who was teaching a small group of students in New York City. What Abdullah taught Neville in the years that followed was something that cracked his entire understanding of reality wide open. Abdullah taught him that the human imagination is not a tool for daydreaming. It is the creative force of the universe itself. He taught him that consciousness is the only reality, that the external world, everything you can see and touch and measure, is simply a projection of what is happening inside the human mind. He taught him that if you want to change your outer world, you do not chase it, force it, or manipulate it. You change your inner world first, completely, totally, with absolute conviction, and the outer world has no choice but to follow. Neville absorbed these ideas with everything he had, and then he tested them. The first test came when Neville desperately wanted to return to Barbados to see his family. He had no money for the ticket, no way to make it happen through ordinary means. Abdullah told him to stop trying to figure out how. Instead, go home in your imagination. Feel yourself already there. Feel the warm air of Barbados on your skin. Feel your family around you. Make it real in your mind first. Neville did exactly that. He imagined it so completely, so vividly, so persistently, that in his mind, he was already home. Days later, out of nowhere, a complete stranger offered him not just a ticket home, but a first-class cabin on the ship, for free. No explanation, no reason. It simply appeared. That experience changed Neville forever. This was not theory anymore. This was real. This was working. And he spent the rest of his life figuring out exactly how and why. By the late 1930s, Neville had stopped dancing entirely. He had found his real purpose. He began teaching. First in small rooms with a handful of people, then in larger halls, then to audiences of hundreds. He had no formal education in theology or philosophy. He had no university credentials. He had no powerful backers or institutional support. What he had was something far more compelling. He had results. The people who came to his lectures and applied what he taught were experiencing things that defied ordinary explanation. A woman who had been told she would never walk again, walked. A man who had been unemployed for 2 years got a job offer the week after applying Neville's method. Marriages, businesses, health, money. People were watching their lives transform in ways that had nothing to do with effort or strategy or luck. Word spread. The audiences grew. And Neville kept teaching, week after week, year after year, with the same relentless conviction. His central idea was simple enough to say, and almost impossible for most people to truly accept. He said, "Your imagination is God, not a God, not a force outside of you that you pray to and hope responds." He said the creative power that built the universe is the same power that lives inside your own mind, and you use it every single day, unconsciously, carelessly, without realizing what you are doing. Every time you imagine failure, you are using that power. Every time you assume the worst, you are using that power. Every time you live in your mind inside a story of lack, limitation, and fear, you are using the most powerful creative force in existence to build more of exactly that. Neville taught that the key was to stop imagining from your current circumstances and start imagining from your desired end. Do not imagine the process of getting what you want. Imagine already having it. Feel it. Live inside that feeling. Make it the dominant reality of your inner world, and watch the outer world rearrange itself around it. He called this the law of assumption. Assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and the fulfillment must follow. Neville Goddard died on October 1st, 1972. He was 67 years old. He died quietly in his home in Los Angeles. At the time of his death, he was known in certain circles. But he was not famous, not in the way that word usually means. He had never written a bestseller. He had never appeared on national television. He had never been embraced by mainstream culture or academia. He died the way he had lived, outside the boundaries of what the world considered acceptable or credible. But then something happened, the same thing that always happens to ideas that are true. They outlive the person who carried them. In the decades after his death, his lectures, his books, his recordings began to spread. First slowly, then faster, then, with the arrival of the internet, explosively. A new generation discovered Neville Goddard and found in his words something they could not find anywhere else. Not just inspiration, not just motivation, a precise, repeatable, testable understanding of how reality actually works. Today, his name is spoken by millions of people around the world. His teachings have influenced coaches, authors, therapists, athletes, entrepreneurs, and ordinary people on every continent. The manifestation movement that has swept through modern culture, the ideas that fill best-selling books and viral social media posts, trace their roots directly back to a dancer from Barbados who stood up in a small room in New York City and told the world something it was not ready to hear. He was right. The world just needed time to catch up. The lesson that philosophy of successful people wants to leave with you today is this: Neville Goddard did not wait for the world to believe him. He did not need their approval. He did not need their credentials or their institutions or their validation. He had something more powerful than all of that. He had direct experience of a truth that worked every single time. And he gave his entire life to sharing that truth with anyone who was willing to listen. So here is the question he would want you to sit with tonight. What are you imagining right now? Not what are you hoping for, not what are you working toward. What is the story you are living inside your own mind? Because according to Neville Goddard, that story is not just a reflection of your reality. It is the cause of it. And the moment you change the story, everything else has to change with it. If this story moved something inside you, subscribe to Philosophy of Successful People. Because here every single week we go deep inside the lives of the greatest minds who ever lived, not just to learn history, but to find the wisdom that changes how you think today. Hit subscribe, turn on notifications, and join thousands of deep thinkers who refuse to stop asking why. See you in the next story.